All right, welcome to the inaugural episode of RainTech's Yet to Be Named podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and every week we'll be bringing in a new person who is a non-technical resource to come in and discuss the latest security findings over the past week. This week, my guest is Brandon Armstrong. He's a good friend of mine, and he's volunteered to come on and discuss these security findings. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so again, my name is Brandon. I live here in Colorado Springs as a real estate agent, and I know a little bit about technology, but not very much. So I'm really excited to be on here, maybe learn a little bit.
Yeah, well, hopefully you and everybody else. So, To start off with, one of the things that this podcast, we're gonna establish a few rules here. So the initial steps of this podcast are going to be, we're going to discuss the latest findings in the security world, in the security realm, as I said earlier. But really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get an idea for those folks who don't necessarily understand what that means. Like, what does it mean when a company is breached? What is the difference between a vulnerability? What's the difference between an exploit? Like, what do these things mean? I don't understand this. And for a normal layperson, it might not make sense. And so it's my job to try to translate that across to you, and also hopefully make everybody aware of some of the crazy crap that's been going on in the world today.
Yeah, I bet.
All right. So the first article we're going to go over now is this one. The SEC is now requiring all publicly traded companies to report breaches within the first 4 days of identification. So what this means is that a company has 4 days from when they know they have been breached to report it publicly, or else they will be fined. And so what this really means for us as consumers is that when you have a company like LastPass is a good example, where they get compromised and we don't hear about it for 2, 3, 4 weeks later, that really prevents us from protecting ourselves. And so, we need to know this, and the SEC is trying to step in on our behalf to get these companies to file this information publicly before it becomes an issue. So we might have a chance. In a lot of circumstances, your information is going to get taken, and when your information is going to get taken, you're not going to know about it. And if you don't know about it, how are you going to be able to protect yourself? For instance, there was the case of Okta. Okta is another publicly traded company. They got breached a couple months ago, and it was one of their employees that got breached. They got into the back-end system of Okta. And if you don't know what Okta is, they are a sign-in provider. They're the people that when you go to a website, a company's website, and you sign in using username and password, Okta provides that page that you're signing into. Oh. They do all of that. And so if Okta doesn't have any reason to report that breach of information for 6 months, then how are those companies going to be able to respond to their customers, let alone their other employees or other vendors, to tell them that, hey, you might want to pay attention a little bit closer? Like, that's a huge threat. And Okta has fingers in a lot of places, even federal government. And so you're gonna end up having these companies who would normally not report this until they can make themselves look better, quote unquote.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, why would you wait so long to disclose something like that, if at all?
Yeah, well, you wait because you want to be able to put a proper spin on it. You want to be able to say, oh, it was a sophisticated attack, and we have all these platforms in place, and look, we've already taken all of these steps on your behalf. Oh, and here's this 50 cents for Norton LifeLock to protect you. I'm not going to go on a rant on that. I'm going to resist the urge to go on a rant about LifeLock. But anyways, it's, they just want to make themselves look better. And anytime, I just want to point out here, if you hear a company say sophisticated attack, what you should hear is, we don't know what we're talking about. That is what that phrase means. Sophisticated attack means we don't know what we're talking about. Because a sophisticated attack, I can engineer one with a script. I can make a machine do that automatically. Yeah, it's sophisticated, but it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah. Well, no, I think this is really great. I'm glad that the SEC is doing that. Even 3 or 4 days, I think, is extreme. I imagine myself dropping my wallet on the street, realizing it after a couple hours, and I can't imagine waiting yet another 3 to 4 days before turning my card off, suspending it.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what's happening with my information, it sounds like, when they have a breach. I don't even know I've dropped the card on the street until weeks later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's a perfect analogy. So yeah, these guys, we can't trust companies to police themselves in this realm anymore. That's really what is coming to. Companies like T-Mobile, they got breached 3 or 4 times. I had a customer this week tell me that they went to T-Mobile to follow up on a security incident that they thought they had. And T-Mobile was like, "Oh yeah, you've had 3 or 4. You've been involved in 3 or 4 other breaches." That's what the T-Mobile, whatever the T-Mobile employee told her, and it was like, you didn't tell her about this beforehand. What is your problem?
Well, it's too sophisticated.
Yeah, it's too sophisticated. Oh yeah. Oh my god. Anyways, moving on. We'll go to the next one. We'll go to the next thing before I hop on a rant about everything else.
Everybody can't hear this, but Mr. Matthew, while he's talking about this, you can see him getting redder and redder with steam coming out of his ears.
Yeah, the guys at my work like to point at the vein that's going across my forehead, and they particularly take joy in watching that pulse as I get more and more upset at things. So one of these days I'm gonna pass due to an aneurysm. We'll see which incident does it. Hopefully it's not this one.
Let's not put that out in the universe.
This next article. Nitrogen malware pushed via Google Ads for ransomware attacks. So I wanted to bring this one up because this is kind of a it's not a new thing, but it highlights a huge issue. So nitrogen malware, it's just a malware that hides inside of legitimate software packages. And so these guys are specifically targeting people like me or other IT professionals who are downloading tools. Specifically, this one is targeting a tool called WinSCP, which is a file transfer tool. And they're targeting this in such a way that if you search for those terms, it's going to be one of the results that pops up. And Google is going to do no vetting for who's purchasing ad space, who's purchasing the search engine optimization ad space. Yeah. Even they're not doing any of that vetting, and so they're just going to take the money and serve up these ads that contain malware that is malicious. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up specifically, and this is a drum I've been hammering this month actually, for all of my customers, is that malware, adware campaigns do not care about where they source their money. There are browsers, there are other efficiency softwares out there that have ads ingrained in their software. And they're serving up ads all the time. They inject them into your searches. They inject them into your websites. They do all of this. And some of them advertise themselves as, oh, well, if you sign up for our browser, we will donate a portion of the money we make off of you to whatever nonprofit organization you want. And that's great and all, but you do no vetting on that. You are signed up for the Google Ads thing, and if there's no vetting at Google Ads, there's no vetting for any ads, like, at all. So
yeah, I actually know a little bit about this in my business. We do use Google Ads every so often for advertisement, and you're absolutely right, Matthew. Basically, they ask you 2 things: what would you like to show, and where's the money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't verify your business, and I can go and purchase an EIN in less than 15 minutes. It doesn't take me long to make a business up.
Right, yeah.
So I can just order one and start serving up malicious ads. So the big point here is don't use third-party ad platforms, stuff that's serving you up ads. I had a client who had a user who would constantly download Sudoku from the Microsoft store. Like they were using a company machine to play Sudoku every day, which I'm not, I'm no judgment here. I'm not inherently bad by itself, but this particular Sudoku was downloading malicious ads. I caught that program downloading the ads. Like it came up in my detection schemes.
So they're playing Sudoku, and then let's say if they lose a game or what have you, or they win, it comes up with an ad before they can play again, and you're saying that ad is malicious?
Not even that, man. It's there's the 9x9 cube and that Sudoku is. You have that on one pane of the window. And then there's another like little pane on the bottom right-hand corner that is nothing but ads. And that just cycles and downloads new ads all day, every day, as long as you're playing Sudoku.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was downloading malicious ads as they were playing Sudoku. So, not even Microsoft. That was a Microsoft product. That was a Microsoft game from Microsoft. And it was serving up these malicious ads. And so not even Microsoft does any of this vetting either. So nobody does the vetting for any of your ads. So get as few ads as possible is what I want to say, is what I want to tell you. But specifically, don't go download stuff that's going to serve you additional ads. So there are a couple of applications, there are a couple of browsers that I want to call out specifically that you need to avoid. And if you use these, you need to uninstall them. So Wave Browser, Wavezer Browser, and OneLaunch. They are popular tools. We've just gone through a campaign where we uninstalled everything across all the environments that we manage. But these specific applications go and get additional ads and serve them up in your searches, in your web pages. They also show them to you as a part of your search function. If you go into your little search bar in your operating system on Windows or on your Mac, it'll show up there. There will be additional ads there. And so it's a huge problem.
Yeah. Well, let me get this straight. So basically, you're saying this new nitrogen malware, which, by the way, why would you call it nitrogen other than maybe it sounds cool to one or two people? They push it through Google Ads because Google Ads doesn't care. They just collect their money and then they push it. And it gives you ransomware through the ads. So you're playing Sudoku, and because let's say if I am somebody's grandparent, let's say, and I just can't help but push that ad. It downloads ransomware and it says, hey, I'm going to lock down your computer unless you give us money. How does that work?
Well, so this isn't necessarily ransomware. This specific nitrogen malware group is using this to install RATs, which are called, they're RATs, R-A-T, which is Remote Access Tool. Basically, it allows an attacker to gain access to your machine. And so if you have a normal home machine, you are an administrative user on that machine, meaning you can do everything you want to that computer that you could possibly ever do.
Sure.
You might not know how, but you can. And so as a normal home user, you automatically have those rights. And so when an attacker gets in, they're going to get in and immediately have full control of your machine. However, if you do this on a work machine where you're in an enterprise environment, you may not be an administrator. You may not even be a local administrator on your computer, meaning you're just a regular user. Yeah. You can't do things like uninstall applications. You can't add new hardware, that sort of thing, which is something an administrator has to do. And that's good. Yeah. But with a remote access tool, an attacker can just sit in the background and wait until they find an opportunity to take over an administrative access and then use that to pivot to take over the rest of the network. And so in my world, in the security world, one of the things that we have to do is we have to plan for failure. And so let's not introduce any additional risk to an environment by allowing ads in there, because all it takes is somebody being lax in security once for an attacker to gain a foothold to then leverage themselves across the network to gain access to everything else and potentially risk an entire business, there is a whole story about this from LinkedIn. There was a LinkedIn employee who had their own personal website hosted on their computer, their personal computer at home, but they had signed into their work email from their personal computer. And so they were serving up this personal website. An attacker got into this personal website, got into the personal computer, got into the email, and eventually used that to leverage to then hack into LinkedIn to steal the entire database that is LinkedIn. This was in like 2016, I think. And so that is just a perfect example of why we don't do this. We don't do this thing where we add additional risk, because even if I do everything perfect as a security professional, a user can very easily sidestep every single one of my security protocols to get in to sacrifice a system, and they may not even be aware they're doing it.
They don't know.
They don't even know. So, yeah. Long story short, we just don't want to have that. We don't want to add that additional
risk.
Additional layer of risk. We want to reduce that as much as possible.
And I can see, because I was thinking this initially, and I'm sure other people are thinking it as well. You know, if I'm a business owner, or not even a business owner, but I'm attached to a business, and this ransomware goes on my computer, okay, what's the big deal? What are they going to do? Steal my pet photos? But I didn't even think of this. But let's say if I am a trusted source for somebody who does have something that the people that make this ransomware want, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, this is your son. I need some money. Can you send over your bank account because I'm your son?
Yeah,
that could be an issue.
Absolutely. And we don't have a way to predict what attackers are looking for. We can make a pretty good judgment based on specific. They're called indicators of compromise, and those are the fingerprints that attackers leave. And so we can kind of tell who does what based on the similarities in their fingerprints. But the ultimate goal is hard to glean when they're just really all trying to get money. That's really the bottom line. They're just all trying to get money.
Or pet photos.
Or pet photos. You can have pictures of my cat, but pictures of my dog, you crossed the line, bud.
That's right.
All right. We'll move on to this next one. This next one is pretty bad. I absolutely hate this. This drives me insane. Everybody who's been in a meeting with me over the past 3 months, 6 months even, has heard me complain about this because it's just the most ridiculous circumstance that I've seen. So to preface this, over the past 18 months, there's been an acceleration in compromises based on specific file transfer toolkits. Last year, it was Excellion, and then next it was Go Anywhere, and now it's Move It. And they're all the same thing, basically. So,
well, really quick, before we go on, what is a file transfer toolkit?
So, file transfer toolkit. So, say you are a business that has 1,000 employees, and your payroll is doing something like doing 401k matching or doing 401k investment, right?
Okay.
So you have a contract with that 401k provider to process and do all that payment action in the background. In order for me to give you that 1,000 employee block of data, you aren't going to want me to just send that to you one at a time. You're not going to want to have somebody do manual data entry, because that's how we used to do it in the 90s. That was why there were so many data entry jobs, because that's what they did. They just processed these transactions one at a time, all the time, all day long. Now what you do is you move it in a block in whatever format they've requested, move it into their server, and then once it's on their server, they process it, and then it magically goes. It does all the stuff in the background and magically ends up in the accounts of all the employees.
Oh, okay.
And so that's one example.
So you're talking about essentially like a glorified Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of information on it.
Yeah, but just think of like every employee has to have their own entry, and so the files are, so it's like 1,000 of them at the same time.
Got it.
And so like if you're Walmart, you're not going to do this one at a time. You're going to do it in the blocks of thousands or hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people, whatever it is, to transfer into this server for whoever's targeting it. And a lot of companies do this. In my customers' experiences, they typically do this for things like transferring patient records to Medicaid, and that's actually what has affected some of my clients. Has been a lot of their patients, because they're medical organizations, have used Medicaid, and the Medicaid office got breached.
Oh.
And this happened.
I'm sure that has a ton of sensitive information.
Yeah, but it's not just the Medicaid office of like, not the local one. This is at the state level. This is the Colorado Medicaid office. And also this week we found out that the federal Medicaid and Medicare office got compromised.
Oh, so everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Like literally, it's been a huge thing. So I brought this up. The specific thing that we're talking about, the specific article is about Move It. And CLOP, the CLOP group, that's the group's name, CLOP. The CLOP ransomware gang has gone through and attacked and downloaded all Move It transfer servers that they could get their hands on. And
Move It is who is transferring that data from one entity to another? Yeah,
that is the software, quote unquote, that is doing that process.
Oh, that is a big deal then. Yeah.
So yeah, this started out, like I said, with Excellion, and then Go Anywhere, and now Move It. And what's really frustrating from my perspective is before all of this happened, there was a release by the CISA that said, take down Move It. We are seeing them get compromised. We are seeing them get exploited. And nobody listened to them. Zero. They did not listen. And it has led to over 500 organizations being compromised. And not small organizations either. We're talking Kirkland, TD Ameritrade. We're talking, like I said, the federal Medicaid office, Medicare office. These guys are getting in without any authentication. They're able to bypass authentication for this. So there's been a lot of questions asked about this. Is like, well, how could this happen? What's going on? And you know, what could people do to prevent this? Right. And the CISA has been trying to answer that question, and it's a little frustrating to me. So the CISA, and if you don't know, the CISA is the cybersecurity it's the body for cybersecurity for the entire United States, including federal government and private companies and all of that. If you want to know how to run your business as far from a security perspective, you listen to the CISA.
Got it.
And as a government agency, you are obligated to listen to them.
Gotcha.
So the CISA has tried to do its best in giving guidance on this. And one of the things that they want to require for people to protect everybody is they want to require that companies that release anything, if you are going to process data through your software, if you're selling your software to process data, you have to have it configured in the most secure way possible. Because right now, when you buy something, like you go and you buy an HP printer, your HP printer has every service enabled and has default passwords. Nothing is unique. Nothing is unknown about your printer from a security perspective. I can walk in to 90% of companies out in the market today, go and find a printer, and it will have default credentials on it, and I can get into it and do whatever I want. And if there's a vulnerability attached to it, chances are I can leverage that vulnerability to compromise and do whatever I want to. The CISA is trying to put an end to that. The Move It and Go Anywhere and Excellion compromises all occurred because they are configured in an insecure way by default. Now, those companies, a lot of companies that are targeted for this, so like MoveIt and Excellion, not the companies that are breached, but the software companies that are attached to this, they like to say things like, oh, well, you should have configured this in a specific way. And, oh, well, this was misconfigured to start with. And the problem is that as an IT guy, I have gone through all implementations of every software I have ever been a part of. And I can't tell you how many times the installer, the person who's onboarding me onto that company, has done it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the company themselves that's doing it incorrectly. And if I as an IT guy, don't have time to go and clean up after your mess necessarily. So I have to trust that you as the vendor know the best way to get this set up and that you're going to set it up appropriately. And if I don't have time to verify, that's a whole problem in and of itself. But if I don't have time to verify, then it may end up being in an insecure, unmanageable way or configuration until somebody either tells me about it or
it's too late.
Or it's too late. Yeah.
How can people take steps to prevent something like this from affecting them?
So that's a tough question to answer, because in this circumstance, there's not really a whole lot that you could do to protect yourself, because a lot of this happens without you understanding the chain that occurred.
Yeah, not even knowing that this exists.
Well, yeah. So for instance, in the Excellion breach, Brown University was one of those organizations that was compromised. Brown University, not a small university by any means, right? Like right. It's a big one. You as a student of Brown would have no idea they were using Excellion. And you would have no idea, even if you may have known that they were using Excellion, you probably would have no idea that it was configured in a way that was insecure, because there's nothing there to tell you that. So as a consumer, as somebody, as a third party who is kind of helpless in this circumstance, there's really not a whole lot you can do to protect yourself against a company that does stuff like this. The one thing that I can suggest is don't allow companies to get away with it. One of the things that we haven't done well as a society really is we have not held companies accountable for their breaches. Equifax, one of the largest breaches in the world, in the history of mankind. 130 million Americans had their credit information stolen from Equifax. You know how much I got from that? $7.30 in a year at LifeLock. Doesn't make sense. Like that, my information's now out there. There's nothing there that makes that better.
Yeah.
So you as a person, what can you do to protect yourself overall is kind of the big question that there. The big thing that you can do to protect yourself, one of the big things you can do is to freeze your credit. So all credit monitoring services now allow you to freeze your credit, and for free. Like they had to make that change. I think 2 years ago there was some sort of judgment that came down and said they can't charge for freezing your credit. But you as a person can freeze your credit, so that way anytime somebody attempts to open a credit account in your name, they have to unlock your account first. It takes like 15 minutes to unfreeze your credit, and you can unfreeze it for a specific period of time. So you can say, sure, hey, I want to unfreeze it for the next...
I'm buying a car.
Yeah, I want to unfreeze it for the next 24 hours. And that's it. So that's like step one, is unfreeze your account or freeze your credit. Freeze your credit, and then unfreeze it when you need it. Step two is don't use the same password. Password reuse is the biggest sin for everybody. It's the biggest sin for folks, and even IT guys have a big problem with password reuse. I have one of my guys who's like who tells me, yeah, I use the same password, but it's an iteration every time I use it. So it's impossible for me to reuse the same password. It's like, well, that's great to defeat bots, but if I get one password, I can, or maybe two, I can really predict what all your passwords are, and I'm going to just try, and that's all I need.
It's not password once. Let's try password 2.
Password exclamation point.
Password 1 exclamation. Yeah,
whatever. And so don't reuse passwords. Have a unique password for all of your accounts. If you have an issue with trying to remember all of your passwords that you need, or remember everything that you need access to, use a password manager. There are plenty of free and great solutions out there. I mentioned LastPass. They're an okay solution, though my trust in them has kind of waned over the last couple of years with the 3 breaches that they've been a part of.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if one of those companies gets a data breach?
Well, so that's why you protect yourself in the best way possible, and we can go over the LastPass breach later. I do have some very pertinent things to say about that, but there are other organizations like Bitwarden is a really good one. You can also use things like KeePass, OnePass. There's also other companies, Psono, that do that, and they all have their own implementations, and some of them allow you to create your own server. So if you have the know-how and the hardware to do it, or if you have an IT team to do it for you, they can build a server, and most of these solutions are free up to a certain number of users. So like Bitwarden, you can create your own server, and it's free for up to 10 users. And it's an enterprise level solution. You can share passwords. You can give temporary access to passwords. You can store everything in this area. It even takes notes, any file you want to put in there. So you can like store credit card numbers and whatnot in a file that you keep in there that's also password protected. It's really good. So that's like number 2. You first freeze your credit. Do that. Second, no password reuse. And if you need to remember all of your passwords, use a password manager. And then last, one of the things that you can do to best protect yourself is to not put yourself into a place where it's easy to find information about you. And what I specifically am calling out is social media. I know everybody's got to have social media. Everybody's got to have a social media presence. Everybody's got to have LinkedIn. Everybody's got to have a Reddit. Everybody's got to have Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Everybody's got to have this stuff because it's how we live as a society today. But what you should do is you should limit people's access, unadulterated access to your information. Because the more information I can get about you out on the internet, the more I can target you as a person. So say, for instance, you go on LinkedIn, you have your LinkedIn profile just open up to everybody, and you start searching for jobs. And you apply, when you're applying for jobs, you don't apply to just one job. You don't apply to just 2 jobs. No, you shotgun that. You try to apply to as many jobs as you possibly can to try to get your dream job, try to get the best fit for you, which is great. It's the right way to do it. The problem is that if you do that, you're inadvertently going to apply to a job that is fake. It is a malicious tracker. Once you apply to that job, it tells the malicious party on the other end to watch your LinkedIn account. And what they do is they watch it for a change, an ad in recent employer, because when you join a new job, the first thing you do is update your LinkedIn profile so all your colleagues know, hey, I got a new job at this one place. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't have a LinkedIn. I'm just going to I do have a LinkedIn, but it hasn't been updated since 2011. They still think I work at Tech for Less. So, shameless plug there. So anyways, the point is when you're on social media, protect yourself. Make sure that only people who you allow, only people you know are allowed to see your information. Make sure that happens. And when you go through, I would say this should be yearly practice for everybody, is go through your social media platform and delete people you don't talk to. There's no reason why you need to be friends with the person who you had math with in high school. There's no reason you need that. They're not going to talk to you. And if they do, it's probably going to be an MLM scheme, man. Don't let them talk to you.
Herbalife.
Herbalife for life, right? Yeah, no. Don't protect yourself and reduce your exposure to the internet. One of the things that a lot of people have a big problem with, specifically business owners or anybody who needs a public face, you're one of these people, by the way.
Sure.
You want your face on the internet. You got to have that because it's how you sell your business, right? Like you got to have your name and your information out on there so people know how to contact you and they know who they're dealing with, which is great. But if you are a juicy target, I know you're doing well. I know you got a lot of money. As an attacker, I'm going to target you. And so if you have information, your direct email, your phone number, if you have your assistant on there listed as your assistant, these are all pieces of data that I can use as an attacker to create a dossier to then meld a combination of events to fool you into giving me money at some point. The specific example, and I'll tell this and then we can move on, but there's a specific example of a client that we had who 18 months before they were our client, they got compromised and they had no idea because this attacker was very patient. They sat in her email for 18 months and just waited and waited and waited until they got control of her iCloud, her Facebook, her LinkedIn, her Microsoft account. They got control of everything. And once they got control of everything, then they started to do things. They contacted her family, told them that she was in jail and she needed bail money. And it's really kind of funny, this whole circumstance, because this attacker sent her, I think it was her uncle, a message and was like, "Hey, I need $27,000 to get out of to post bail to get out of jail." And her uncle talked the dude down to like 10 grand. So it went from like $24,000 to 10 grand. Still got the money. So, but that's the sort of circumstance where if you aren't careful with your information and what you're doing, people can just own you if they know how to get to you.
Oh yeah.
And to bring it back to the LinkedIn thing, when you change jobs, when you started a new company, you might not be familiar with everybody who works there. You might not be familiar with how they do business. And there are circumstances where an attacker will use that to leverage information about you. And
hi, this is HR from the new company. Don't worry, we just need your social.
Exactly. Things like that. Or even there's this happened to us, our business. We hired our project manager, and the day she got hired, she got a text from somebody who is posing as our CEO and was like, "Hey, I need you to go out and buy me some gift cards." And like, big red flag, but if she had no idea how we did business and she thought she was just doing something nice for our CEO, she would be out that money. It's happened. We had somebody at another client of ours lose $5,000. She was just somebody who was working in at one of the front desks, and somebody had posed as one of the HR people and said, "Hey, we're doing an employee raffle, and we need you to go and purchase some gift cards, $5,000, any gift cards you want, and then you just bring them back in, and we'll reimburse you.
Yeah.
We'll reimburse you for that cost." And so there's a long path for them to make money on this. Just don't get too lost in that. But all they want is to get that.
Yeah. Honestly, I remember this happened to me about a year ago in our entire company. Brandon Armstrong was sending texts and emails to everybody saying, "This is Brandon Armstrong. I need you to give me money because, I work with you, or I'm your boss." And luckily, of course, you have to question it first before doing something like that. And I think that's the point that you're really trying to make is question things.
Oh, yeah.
Figure out who's asking. Maybe verify as much as you can with that person in different ways. And then it sounds like I can't really protect myself fully or prevent things fully. However, don't be that low-hanging fruit for these people.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be that low-hanging fruit. And you bring up a lot of good points, and there's a lot to be covered there. And obviously, I'm not gonna hold everybody hostage here to listen to the entire diatribe, but we'll go over this as these episodes progress. We'll go over more and more of these things as these episodes progress. So don't worry about that. The last thing I'll say on this is the easiest way to protect yourself is exactly what you said. Question. If something isn't normal, if something doesn't seem normal, always ask a question. The first thing an attacker will do, or one of the first things an attacker will do, is they will attempt to put a sense of urgency on whatever they're attempting to do. Whether it's ransomware, whether it's attempting to get you to give them money. Hey, I need bail to get out of jail. Hey, you have 24 hours to respond to us, or we're going to delete all your files. Whatever. They try to attach a sense of urgency to the situation. Don't let them do that. If they're doing that, they're controlling you, and that's how a con works.
Good advice.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. So this one is super dumb for a lot of reasons. Now, I don't know what legal problems I might run into if I trash talk Microsoft too much, but suffice it to say, I could trash talk Microsoft all day long and not even get started. I am by no means the exception to the rule for IT guys. This specific incident is a circumstance that occurred a couple weeks ago where the U.S. government got hacked. A lot of agency emails got hacked because Microsoft lost control of their encryption keys. And China gained access.
Serious.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's huge. It's gigantic. But one of the things you need to keep in mind is this is not the first time this has happened, and this isn't even the most severe time this has happened. This happened earlier, I think in 2018. The exact same situation. They lost their encryption keys to Exchange, and they got into email servers all across the world.
Now, I've heard that term a couple times, encryption keys, but I've never really understood what it means. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so encryption and certifications and things like that, they all tie in a lot of different ways. But the simplest terms, an encryption key is the password that you'll use to decode something that is locked,
Encrypted.
Yeah, it is. It is the key to the lock. That's why it's called an encryption key. In this circumstance, the encryption key is the way that Microsoft is able to process events in the background. This event was pretty big because it didn't just affect the U.S. government, it also affected a bunch of nonprofits and whatnot. But I think the biggest thing that came from this is that there was a conversation after this all happened and the federal government found out about it, and they did a debrief about it. They had a call with Microsoft, and I don't know what was said on that call. I kind of wish I were a fly on that wall because it probably was hilarious. But I imagine it went something like this, where the person in charge of the debrief on the government side was like, okay, so I don't understand, why didn't we have access to the logging information that could have allowed us to detect this sooner? And Microsoft's response was probably something akin to, because you didn't pay us enough money. Now, the federal government pays Microsoft a ton of money, like a shit ton of money. And I say that meaning it is just a gigantic sum, not because I'm trying to be vulgar, but it is a gigantic sum.
We're talking yacht money.
Yeah, well, more than that. We're talking the guy the sales guy who makes a 100th of a percentage point on that sale has a yacht. Yeah.
We're talking about owning the yacht company.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. We're talking a lot of money. And so I imagined who the person from the government who was on that call was pretty dumbfounded by that statement. because the next day, the CISA released a statement that said, "We expect to hear positive things from Microsoft regarding logging information in the next coming weeks." And yeah, it happened. Last week, we got a notification from Microsoft that they are allowing us to gain access logs to the back-end systems of Office 365. Now, for non-technical people, this probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but in the realm of security, when you sign into Microsoft, I can't tell everything that you're doing, and I can't even tell what machine you're doing everything from. And that's a problem, because if you switch machines, then I can't see that. And if you switch machines or switch locations, I can't see that you're coming from a different location until Microsoft lets me know. And that's a problem. So I think where Microsoft is going to, where we're going to gain insight from Microsoft, rather, is that Microsoft is going to allow us to see those back-end transaction logs that will tell us when information changes. And in fact, something happened today where they released information where it's called continuous access evaluation. And what that means is, as you do things in Microsoft, in Office 365 or in your email or whatever, your access is continually evaluated. Whereas once you signed in, that's it. You're signed in, good. You got your username and password, excellent. You used a multi-factor authentication, even better. And they just let you do whatever you want without any sort of hindrance. But now that they've added this continuous access evaluation, if you change computers, if you change locations, and you're using the same authentication token, which is the term that when you use an encryption key in the realm of the internet, rather than ask you for that key every time you try to do something, you're given a token that says you're good to do this for a specific time period. For Microsoft, that token lasts for 90 days. And so, as an attacker, you have 90 days to do whatever it is you want before you have to even worry about signing in again.
Okay.
And so, with this continuous access evaluation, when you start doing stuff with that token, if you change locations, guess what? You have to sign in again because that token no longer is valid. And it's great because it stops active sessions from being misused. One of the things we see from an attack standpoint in the security realm is we see what's called cookie swap. And so if you sign into a computer, if you sign in to Microsoft using your computer, I can take the token that is on your computer, the cookie, and I can put it on my computer.
Because it's essentially a file that you can move.
That's right. It is. That's exactly right. I can take that cookie, put it on my computer, and then sign in. And your computer can be a Windows machine, and my computer can be a Mac. Microsoft doesn't care because they haven't for the longest time.
Because they don't have to care, it sounds like.
Well, now they do.
Got it. Okay.
So it sucks for the federal government, for the United States federal government, for a lot of reasons, but this may actually end up being a good thing for all of us privatized companies, all of us private individuals, because we'll now have a greater access to security tools that we didn't have access to before. Now, as a single person, working either in a small business that doesn't have an IT team, or has their own personal Outlook account or Office 365 account, probably not going to be anything you can do to prevent this if you don't have a dedicated team for it. But one of the things that this allows Microsoft to do, honestly, is it allows them to lower the bar of entry for you as individuals to allow them to protect you. Because previously Microsoft has been like, oh no, you have to pay to play for security. You want better security? Pay me $20 a month more. Yeah. That sort of thing. And it's a huge problem. It's been a thing for forever. Anyways, the whole thing is it's getting tied up, and I like where it's going. I can't wait for the new logging to be released. That's going to happen sometime in September. We have no idea what it's going to look like, but we're already primed for it. Once we can find that information, we're going to start pulling those logs in and using it to detect stuff. It's going to be cool. It's going to be neat.
Awesome. Sounds like it's much easier for you to do your job to monitor potentially bad things when they change. If somebody, so if I understand this right, it's almost like a car, accessing a car. So you access your car, it checks this new system would check to see, okay, is this you logging into your car? And then you sit down. Well, looks like you gained a couple pounds. I need you to go ahead and verify it's you again. Oh, actually, your car is now purple. I need you to verify again. Oh, it looks like you're driving to a different location. I need you to verify again. Whereas before, you just go ahead and go right into the car as long as you have the key. And, if you drive to Mexico because you've stolen the car, then it's not really Microsoft's problem because you didn't pay them an extra $10 to check.
Exactly. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
That's a good analogy. Except, if it's a Tesla, because, Teslas are really easy to steal.
Oh,
next. All right. So here's another one. This is very interesting vulnerability that's popped up that I wanted to bring up, and with it, a larger aspect of threat that has occurred over the last few years. You may have heard of something called supply chain management.
Sure.
Yeah. So supply chain management or supply chain attacks. A supply chain is basically a stream to get to the consumer, and it involves anything. So from a supply chain aspect in security, we are looking at the supply chain of software. So software is not written by one person. No one piece of software is written by one person anymore. There are dozens of repositories and dependencies that every software has. And if you as a developer are creating software, you use these dependencies, and when you create your software to deliver to a client, to a customer, to the world, you compile them together and you just deliver it. And so the problem that we see is that a lot of people are targeting these repositories.
Gotcha.
And so if they compromise one repository, they get dozens of pieces of software that are out there. Okay. And that's the big problem that we see here. So this specific incident, it involves GitHub. And what this is called, it's called repo jacking. So go ahead.
Well, GitHub, I think I've accidentally, honestly, gone onto GitHub a couple times, just Googling around. If I recall, GitHub is where people put their codes and programs to share to everybody else.
Kinda, yeah. It's kind of like social media for developers. They're like, hey, check out this thing I'm working on. And it allows people to interact with it. It allows people to add comments, add improvements. It allows people like me, security researchers, to investigate the software, to make determinations if it's safe or not to use. It allows open source programming, essentially. You can do a lot with GitHub. It's very useful. It's very nice because a lot of the tools that I use actually come from GitHub. And I have to analyze everything that I use that I get from GitHub.
Vet it.
Yeah, I have to vet it, because if it's something that has a compromised or malicious extension, I need to know that.
Yeah.
So GitHub, now that we've covered what GitHub is,
right.
GitHub, the locations where you store that software are called repos. And these repos can be a single piece of software, they can be groups of software, but they are just a storage location for all of this software. And this specific exploit or vulnerability or whatever you want to call it is called repo jacking. And what this is it's a method of taking control of repos through a method that is kind of dumb. So I, as a business, let's say I make a startup. My startup is called Ited Myself, and so I create Ited Myself, and I serve my software out there. And I'm like, okay, you guys you guys have access to my GitHub. This is what it does. But then 6 months down the road, after I've successfully sold my software to 1,000 people, 1 million people, whatever, Microsoft comes by and says, "Hey, we're purchasing you," and they buy me, and they buy Ited Myself. Well, what happens is they then ingest my GitHub repos into theirs, so they take control of them. So when I create my account for GitHub, I initially create it as Ited Myself, and so Ited Myself exists, and then suddenly it gets purchased and gets absorbed into Microsoft, and Ited Myself no longer exists. And so the problem is now somebody can be like, "Oh, I want Ited Myself." So they register for Ited Myself in GitHub. What happens is the backend of GitHub never cleans up the background connections to that old repo that Microsoft now owns. And so an attacker could be paying attention to who purchases who, register as a new business that is now has now been absorbed by Google or Microsoft or whoever, and then control those now private software packages and compromise them, add their own tools, add their own malware, whatever.
Wow. So if I'm understanding right, so you have a company like Ited Myself. I'm an entity. I have my own repos. Microsoft buys that and transfers it over to their repository that they already have set up.
Yeah.
Those underlying connections that give people access to Ited Myself, though, are still there. So I sign up as Ited Myself, automatically get that access. Oh, I see.
Yeah, you got it. That's it. There is no there. This is kind of a dumb situation that's like, how if I create a new user in any sort of software and it's the same name as an old user, that new user no longer doesn't just get all of the rights of the old user.
Yeah.
The back end system of GitHub, who is owned by Microsoft, by the way, the back end system must be there must be some crazy mixed up thing that goes on there. They must never like fully sever the connections in the back end, which is weird to me, because like you absolutely should.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if Richard Simmons has a Facebook account and then he deletes it and then I sign up as Richard Simmons, I shouldn't be able to get all of Richard Simmons, exercise videos for free.
Yeah, but you'd look good in gold shorts.
Thanks. I think so too.
So the GitHub thing, it's there are over 300 million repos on GitHub. 125 million repos are available to be analyzed, and of those 125 million, over 37,000 repos are vulnerable to this kind of repo jacking. That was detected just earlier this year. This wasn't like in 2019. This wasn't like 5 years ago. This was this year, 2023.
And also, just so I understand, I understand why you want, just obviously, no matter what the content is, you don't want somebody to have access to something that isn't theirs or they have no permission for. But what can they do?
So like I said earlier, if I have access to a repo that is currently being used for other projects, I can insert my own code into that repo. And if you as a business, Microsoft, are not necessarily paying attention to the repo that
source
is
of it,
yeah, if you're not necessarily paying attention to it, you're going to include my code along with yours. And so where this comes into play is circumstances like SolarWinds. I don't know if you remember the SolarWinds attack, but this is what it leads to is something like the SolarWinds attack. So it wasn't exactly like this, but this is the power of what this could be. So the SolarWinds attack was an attack that was exercised supposedly by Russian nation-state hackers. And so this was not small time at all. And they gained access to one of the back-end update servers to SolarWinds. The SolarWinds Orion software specifically. And SolarWinds Orion is a software that automatically has a lot of access into systems. It controls network gear, so it can control like what ports do what firewalls do,
Gotcha.
what ports are allowed. And so what this attacker did is they installed their own, they built their own firmware, their own version of the Orion software, and put it on this update server, and then pushed it to all of the SolarWinds Orion customers, which were places like the Department of Justice, the FBI, millions of organizations. Cisco was part of this. So they did all of this, and they were able to get a lot of data, and they were able to compromise a lot of customers. And that is the power of what this can do, because the supply chain, if you aren't aware of what's going on, if you aren't paying attention, if you download something that's malicious and you're not seeing it, they can run havoc in your system. Now, the good news to the SolarWinds thing is that they were able to detect it, and they were able to button it down pretty well. In fact, one of the companies that I follow, Huntress, was able to be on the front line of this and sort of detect it as it occurred. So it was really awesome. Like, the whole thing was kind of cool from that perspective, from that security perspective. But now there's been a lot of trust lost in SolarWinds. I had companies dump it.
Bet.
Yeah, I had companies dump it because they had no trust in that. And so, the point being is you have to trust your supply chain. You have to be able to trust it. And this circumstance really makes GitHub repositories. It really makes anybody who has a GitHub repository
can't trust it.
Yeah, you can't really trust it if they've been purchased. So, you kind of have to pay attention. It's really hard to know what is in a software and what's not. So one of the things that we're pushing for in the security industry is we are pushing for something that's called a software bill of materials. And what this is it is something that software vendors should be able to provide with their software that tells you what their software contains, what repositories it contains, what dependencies it contains, what that software uses, so that way when one of those pieces gets compromised, Log4j, SolarWinds, whatever that software uses, and you can defend yourself appropriately. Now, I've had a lot of vendors tell me no, because they're not required to do that. But I am taking a hard and steadfast line here. If you are a software vendor and I am doing business with you, you are going to provide me with a bill of materials that I can scan against. Google automatically has a software bill of materials scanner that they have pushed out for free that will tell us if your software contains malicious or compromised repositories. So this is not something that is going to go away, and this is not something that is hard to do. The one big complaint, the one thing that software vendors are really rallying against or throwing against this is, well, it removes some of our competitive advantage if people know how we've made our software. And yes, I understand that from a perspective of, I know what pieces make your Legos, or I know what Legos make the house. Yeah, that's great, but I still have to put them together. You don't pay a software coder $100,000 a year because they copy and paste code. You pay them $100,000 a year because they know what code to paste where. So
right, yeah.
that's what makes your software special, not the what's in it, but the how you put it together.
Sure.
So if it contains public repositories, it's great. If it contains personal repositories, you don't have to include those because those are out of scope. We are only talking about the openly available, open source data or pieces of your Lego brick house. That's all we want. Basically, just the 6x2s or the 3x2s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The 3x2 Legos.
And at the end of the day, sounds like there's a reason, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason for this.
Yeah, this isn't a hard ask, and this isn't something that's unreasonable for really shouldn't be unreasonable for anybody. Yeah.
Awesome, yeah.
So yeah, those are the five articles that we looked at. The sources that I get these from are Bleeping Computer and The Hacker Weekly. There are also a bunch of other websites to get these from. Dark Reading is another really good one. Krebs on Security. There's also Darknet Diaries, which you can look at to see a bunch of information about security and the latest happenings. There's also the CISA has a daily public release. Anytime they release information on new vulnerabilities that are out there on the world, you can subscribe to that newsletter. It's at CIA's website at cisa.gov. Otherwise, there's all this information. I'll go back over these headlines. The headlines that we went over are SEC now requires companies to disclose cyber attacks in 4 days. The next one is new nitrogen malware pushed via Google Ads for ransomware attacks. The next one is Clop now leaks data stolen in MoveIt attacks on clear websites. U.S. government agencies emails compromised in China-backed cyber attack.
See, that's 6 times fast.
Yeah, right? Oh my God. And then this last one was millions of GitHub repos likely vulnerable to repo jacking, researchers say. And like I said, these were all from either Bleeping Computer or thehackernews.com. So, you have any other questions? Anything else you want to cover real quick?
No, that's it's a lot of information. Basically, don't be clicking those Sudoku ads.
Yeah,
and ask some questions. And for God's sake, if you have a lot of money invested in an infrastructure, maybe hire somebody to keep track of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been Matthew Miniman and Brandon Armstrong for the yet to be named Rain Tech podcast.